Hello and welcome back to the GorillaBiker, and today we're going to be talking about something that I have been speaking about honestly for a long time on and off in videos, but I thought I would clarify my position. Behind me on the board, which you'll probably see is zoomed in close up now, is the power to weight and also 0 to 60 times and torque to weight in brackets of the bikes that I have in the garage right here right now, and also the CTX-1300 which I recently test rode. Just to run through it really quick, the highest power to weight bike is the Z900RS. These are all stock numbers, by the way, not the corrected number for the Ivan's Performance 2 that I do have on the Z. This is in horsepower per kilogram, and then in the brackets is actually horsepower per pound. But the Z900RS is 0.52, which is the most powerful power to weight on the list. And then the V-Strom is the second. What I'm trying to get at here is you'll see people have been calling the Rebel 500 slow, some people quite unkindly so, in direct Instagram messages, and rather than try to address every single one singly, I decided to just kind of use facts, which I know hurts some people, but there we go. So just to be clear, right, this is not a kind of a bashing video or anything. This is purely to just show you that the Rebel 500 as a cruiser is actually perfectly capable, and if you're being put off from buying one by the big high horsepower number that it doesn't have, don't be. Small bikes are fun. Some bikes you just have to actually use all of the gears on. Yes, top speed is a consideration, but honestly, challenge yourself with that. I guarantee you're not going to be wanting to go doing 130 miles an hour everywhere anyway. And if you do, you should probably just go to a track and get a track bike, honestly, because around here especially, I'm really sick of seeing people getting hurt on the roads. So, I just wanted to run through this because basically I think everyone would agree the WRX STI is a very fast car. That's the 2024 with the manual. It also costs like $32,000 starting. You wouldn't get one for $32,000, but that was the starting MSRP. And the Rebel is more powerful than it both in power to weight and torque to weight, and also has a claimed better 0 to 60 time. I haven't tested any of these 0 to 60s in person, so obviously take everything with a pinch of salt. But the fastest 0 to 60 time, unsurprisingly, is the Nissan GT-R R35, but that is comes at a cost per horsepower, I have my notes here, of $217 per horsepower. If you get the starting price one, which is $125,000, I don't know does that exist, but that's last year's edition, and they go up to $250,000. So you're probably paying closer to that, which would obviously double that cost per horsepower number that I have here. The Rebel 500, would be $117 per horsepower for what we paid for ours, and the WRX STI absolute starting price would be $120 per horsepower. So actually, you can see that the cost equivalency is pretty damn close. This is why I've always said, peak power doesn't really make a difference, right? Because most people live somewhere between 0 and 60 miles an hour most of the time, whether they're on back roads or in cities. If you go to the track, fair enough. Honestly, none of these bikes are really suitable other than the SV650, which is funny because the SV650 is less powerful both in power to weight and torque to weight than the Z, and has worse 0 to 60 time. And that's the other thing, that there's so many intangibles. Like, for instance, if you want something that corners well, you have to look at chassis, you have to look at ground clearance and all that stuff. Like the SV650 corners so much better than the Z. It's actually faster on track, despite the fact that the Z900RS absolutely beats it out on every, digit that you'll read on paper. And that's why it's so important not to just focus on the paper. Like, I'll put up some dyno graphs on screen now. I think where I got most of them were Cycle World, so thanks Cycle World. They just have them online. But if you look at the comparison to where most people ride, it's not at redline. Most people will ride somewhere middle of their rev range or slightly lower. Most people is where they ride. It's where I mostly ride. And most people ride torque, and that's what I want to get to. So if you're looking at this, your 0 to 60 time is actually based not really off the numbers you see in the peak power you see, but it's actually more the torque. So for instance, the torque on the CTX-1300, the CTX-1300 power to weight is exactly the same as the Rebel. However, torque to weight is considerably more. And that torque peak comes on at 4,500 RPM and continues. So it's pretty much a flat line. Very similar, honestly, to the Rebel 500. It's pretty much a flat line, but it peaks at 6,500 RPM. And that's where the difference is in 0 to 60 time. For the Rebel, it's claimed between 4.8 and 5.2, so I went in the middle and said 5. The CTX is 4. And that really, honestly, is another thing that, you know, I feel like it gets lost sometimes, is that people focus so much on the digits. Like if you look at the CTX's power to weight, you'd be like, that's so slow. But really, it's not. I've ridden one. They're quite fast. Actually, very comparable, unsurprisingly, to the Rebel. It's a nice amount of power for a cruiser. The Rebel is more fun if you had like super twisty roads, because it's much lighter and you can really fling it into corners and use all of the gear all of the time. Like you can bang through the 6 gears that are on that bike just because you can actually live up there and use all that power. Whereas the CTX isn't really made for that, and it would definitely get more out of sorts if you were absolutely trying to throw it into some tighter corners faster than the Rebel would. But then neither of those are particularly made for that. And that's, you know, again, if you looked at pure numbers on a page, which is what too many people do buying things, the Supra also has a power to weight of 0.25 horsepower per kilo. But the Supra in the manual trim, the automatic trim gets to 0 to 60 in 3.8, the manual is 4.2. So again, if you were just to look at power to weight, you'd be like, the Supra is as fast as a Rebel? No, and that's because of gearing. So not only gearing, but also your torque to weight. You can see that the Supra is way closer to the CTX 1300 because of torque. You know, that it's what gets you going. It's what's lower in your rev range. If you're on a race bike, peak horsepower is extremely important. Like if you're going around the Isle of Man TT, that's what's gonna get you to those top speeds and push you through the air when you're up there. But getting going is torque, and that's what I've been trying to say for so long. Is if you're scared of a smaller bike, don't be. Like 0 to 60 times, there where your fun acceleration is, right? Because that's if you're doing like light to light, or you're, you know, kicking off on a back road. That's kind of where the fun is. But not only that, I think, you know, for instance, the Z900RS, I can be at every speed limit in the country here in like 2nd gear, 3rd gear max, which is fine. But also it's kind of like, I'd like to actually rev through the gears more and hear the bike more, whereas you can do that on the likes of the Rebel. But it is very application specific. What I'm trying to say though is don't be scared away by like a lower displacement, lower horsepower number, because it doesn't tell the full story. You have to look at the weight, because that's going to tell you how easy it is to get in and out of corners and how easy it is just to move around in general. You have to look at the price. Obviously the price of like a WRX STI starts at $32,000, whereas you're looking at a third of that for the Rebel. At least, no less than a third of that for the Rebel. The Z900RS absolutely trounces everything on this board. Both power to weight and torque to weight wise, and it costs $12,000 roughly starting for the 2019 one was, say. And I mean, like, you're literally saying it's more than double of the Supra power to weight ratio wise. Now again, a lot of the reason it's so quick 0 to 60 is because it has, you know, like shorter gearing. If you have longer gears, you're going to take longer to get to 60. If you have shorter gears, you're going to take less time to get to 60. But then people will complain, like they used to do on my Honda CBF 1000, is, oh, it felt like it always needed another gear, like a 7th gear, because the 6th gear was so short, they thought they were revving it too much. But basically what I'm saying is you can't win. If you have a shorter geared bike, it'll feel much faster. But people will complain that it uses too much fuel and it sits too high in the revs when you're cruising at 60, 70 miles an hour. If you have a longer geared bike, people will complain it feels too slow. And they'll get a good MPG, but then they were like, oh, if only I had some shorter gears. And you end up with the CTX 1300, which has longer gears, is good on fuel, but everyone always wants a 6th gear. You know, why is there not a 6th gear and these ones are slightly shorter? Which I personally agree with. I think 6 gears would have done well on it. But what I'm trying to say is, if you look at this list, you would be led to believe that the WRX STI, the Supra, and the Golf R are slow. And they're not. They're very, very fast. And that's all because of how the car is built. Like the Golf R, all-wheel drive. WRX STI, all-wheel drive. GTR, all-wheel drive. Supra, rear-wheel drive. And that's again why the Golf R actually beats out the Supra in a 0 to 60, because of its transmission style, like its actual gearbox, its shorter range, and it's the fancy DSG stuff. The Supra manual is a manual, so you're relying on people. Your length of your gears like ratio wise. So if you have really wide ratio gears, it's slower. Close ratio, faster. 0 to 60. If you want to just simplify it to that. But that's why it's important that you don't look at peak horsepower numbers, right? If you're buying a bike, go ride it. I've seen people turn away from like the GSX-8S, the Suzuki one, the Naked Twin. Like, people I know who have those think they're a blast, and that's because they're torquey. The engine is fantastic. Same engine that's in their 800DE V-Strom, their 800RE V-Strom, the GSX-R, like same engine. They'll be geared slightly differently. They'll be tuned slightly differently. But overall, that's why you can't just look at peak horsepower numbers. Don't be turned away because you're buying a bike that's not 200 horsepower. You could buy a Fireblade or S1000RR or something that has close to 200 or more than 200. But I guarantee you, if you're around town, you're using less than half of that. You know what I mean? Because look at the dyno chart for those bikes. And if you're sitting at like less than half the rev range, that's where your actual power is, and that's a wide open throttle. And that's another thing to also bear in mind, is that modern bikes with throttle by wire, at wide open throttle, you don't actually get, at wide open throttle requested, so you're turning the throttle the whole way it'll go. You don't actually get 100% at the throttle. That's managed by the computer, by the gear. So depending on the gear and depending on the revs, it will actually allow you to have 100% or less, even if you're requesting 100%. Look up Two Wheel Dyno Works. He'll explain that much better than I do. He's actually a professional with dyno tuning and knows a hell of a lot more than I do. I just know how to write some numbers down and talk about them. I obviously do know enough to be dangerous with this stuff, and that's what I'm kind of saying. Like, just to put it into perspective, the CTX 1300 is 328 kilos or 724 pounds, and the Rebel is 185 kilos or 408 pounds. That's how they can end up at the same power to weight. So peak power is not everything. If you had 2,000 brake horsepower, but your car weighed as much as a house because it was made out of the densest material known to man or something, it's not going to go anywhere very fast. You know what I mean? Sure, it's a 200 brake horsepower engine. You definitely take it out of your super dense, super heavy car and put it in something else. But that's my point, is peak horsepower numbers don't tell the full story. You have to look at the actual power curve, the torque curve. You have to look at the weight. Power to weight is a good indicator of how fast something's going to be, acceleration wise and everything else. Just as a broad look, if you're not looking at like gearing and whatever else, is a close ratio, wide ratio gearbox, it's a good indicator, which is, you can see, like for instance, the Rebel, the CTX and the Supra are all the same power to weight. Obviously the Rebel is the lower torque to weight, which is also why it's around 5 seconds, and the CTX is 4 and the Supra is 4.2 seconds, 0 to 60. Like I said, good indicator doesn't tell the whole story. You actually have to look at also the torque to weight. So, and this is all easy to calculate, right? If you ever actually, can't Google it and you want to work it out yourself, just get the power, peak power, and get your weight for your vehicle. Divide the power by the weight, and then you get your power to weight. And whatever that ratio comes out at, you can come back and compare it on this video and see roughly where you're going to be, or you can just go test ride the thing, which is what I would recommend, so you actually get a feel of how it rides. Because like I said, all those intangibles, like the suspension geometry, the rider triangle, like how you're actually sitting up on the thing, the gearing, whether it's wide or close, even the tires, they all make a difference. Don't buy a bike based off the peak horsepower. Don't write off a bike based on the peak horsepower. And don't send me mean comments because you think that 48 horsepower isn't enough to carry your big, massive around. Yeah, I'm not going to use that bit. But yeah, anyway, hopefully this was enlightening. Basically what I'm saying is the Rebel 500 is faster than the WRX STI. Because it is. In every measure except top speed. Is it faster on the track? Absolutely not. But it's faster 0 to 60, and apparently that's all that matters to some people. So yeah. If you've watched, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully this was somewhat interesting for some people out there. If you enjoyed the video, please do let me know in the comments. If you have any questions about any of the numbers I talked about, there was a fly on my foot, sorry. Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please do consider hitting the like button. It helps a lot. And let me know, out of all the things on the board there, what would you go for? And would you go for it based off power to weight, or would you go for it off looks, comfort, and other things that honestly are more important. Handling to me is way more important than outright power. Cornering, for instance, SV650, way more fun and track than the Z because I can corner so much faster on the SV. So yeah, anyway, thanks again for watching. Special thank you as always to all of my patrons. Hopefully this is interesting to some of you. Who knows, this is the first time I've done something like this, and maybe I'll do it again and make it better if you enjoyed it. And yeah, until next time, thanks again, adios. Outro crew, based off this, I would really like to know what your bike is. Leave it in the comments, what your bike is, what the power to weight is, and what the theoretical 0 to 60 time is, or have you measured it, just to see, you know, is it what you would expect roughly from your power to weight and torque to weight, or yeah, is it something that is completely out of the blue, like slower or faster, because that's probably your gearing and tires and everything else that matters in these conversations. So yeah, and yeah, would you buy a Rebel 500? I think it's cool. I really like it, especially now that it's kind of finished. You can't see the full finished package yet because there's another video that's not released yet that hopefully you'll see soon. Okay, bye, outro crew.